Good evening, everyone, and welcome along to round number 2 of the Junior Saloon Car Championship's official eSeries, coming to you live this evening from a virtual Donington Park National Circuit, a track that always guarantees some of the best one-mate racing around. And based on what we saw a week ago at Silverstone, I'm expecting nothing different on this occasion. My name is Andy McEwen, here to talk you through all of the action across the pair of 20-minute races coming your way this evening. A big thank you as well to everyone who is working so hard in the background on what is a very exciting championship that already has got off to a really good start. As I said, we were racing at Silverstone a week ago on the international circuit. One or two issues, server related issues, unfortunately, in the second race means that the final decision that was made was for the second race that we got about halfway through to not count towards the championship. We'll deal with that at a later point in the season, so for now just the one race result that stands from Silverstone, but we are confident we won't have the same sort of issues here tonight at Donington Park. In a week's time we head to Brands Hatch on the Indy circuit, then Croft, a circuit that isn't visited all that often in sim racing, unfortunately, but we'll be paying it a visit at the midway point of the season. Then we head to the greatest racetrack in the world, Alton Park, the Island circuit on the 23rd of March, before Snetterton's full 300 circuit greets the drivers for the penultimate round, and it all gets concluded at the high-speed Thruxton down in the southwest of England, a calendar that uses some of the very best racetracks in the United Kingdom, as indeed is the case for the real-world Junior Saloon Car Championship itself. As always, with sim racing, it's always nice to have some pretty tasty prizes up for grabs for our drivers, and this one absolutely no different. We have money on the line for the top 3 drivers come the end of the season, £300 for our champion, or they can choose instead to cash that in almost and get hold of an Optics 31.5-inch curved gaming monitor to really improve their sim racing setup. I know a lot of the drivers in this series haven't done a huge amount of sim racing in the past, so it's perhaps a safe assumption that they are maybe using some fairly basic sim setups, and that is the perfect way for them to upgrade it. Or they can take £300 and put it towards upgrading it in some other way. Second place, £200. Third place in the championship receiving £100. And each week, the Driver of the Round award, which is decided by the whole crew here at the Junior Saloon Car Championship eSeries, they will receive a pair of sim racing gloves courtesy of our sponsor FreeM, and we thank them for their continued support. Well, who is in line to win these prizes? Well, far too early to tell, really, especially because we did only have the one race that scored points a week ago. But the early signs are that you would be daft, really, to bank against CJ Morgan, because CJ qualified on pole position for that first race, led every single lap, set the fastest lap of the race as well, on course to a race victory. So he took maximum points out of that first week of racing. In fairness, he was also leading race 2, having come through from the back of the grid at the point that the red flag came out, so perhaps was on for even more points. As it is, arrives here at Donington with a 5-point advantage over Levine Kishore, who was second in that first race, and Levine had a fantastic battle all race long with Riley Bishop, so those two very close on points and very close on pace as well. Charlie Constable and Jensen Bell complete the top 5 ahead of Lewis Stannard, Harley Connolly even, Nathan Jensen, Zach Palmer and James Sherrington. But as you can see, points all the way down the order. Wherever you finish within reason, you will score some points. So even Jonathan Moore and Cameron Pratt-Thompson, who were on the receiving end of some penalties, unfortunately, for some driving standards infringements a week ago, they still managed to take a championship point out of the season opener. But with 6 weeks of racing still to go, at least 12 races between now and the end of the championship, it is still all to play for. And we've seen many a championship in the past, both in real-world competition and in sim racing, that everyone sort of said was going to be dominated by one driver, become an awful lot more competitive as we go through the season, and this one may well be the same case. Well, we're into qualifying for our second event of the season then, a 15-minute qualifying session. We're joining the drivers about halfway through the session, so just really as we're starting to get some properly representative lap times. And so far it's Riley Bishop who is fastest, having done a time of a 1 minute 27.702, so he's about a tenth of a second up on early championship leader CJ Morgan. And this is kind of what I expected. Riley Bishop was quick a week ago at Silverstone. He was on the podium in that race on the international circuit at the home of British Motorsport, and there was nothing to say that he wouldn't be able to really take the fight to CJ here this week. And so far, That's exactly what he's doing. A 1/10 of a second cushion is not a big one, though, and he would like to try and improve if he can. CJ Morgan is second right now, so at the moment, those two would start on the front row together ahead of Alexander Mostav, who was involved in a couple of incidents at Silverstone a week ago. Luke Stintler, new driver to the championship, didn't join us for the opening round, but he currently is 4th fastest, and Jordan Taylor currently completing the top 5. So the big question really is, where is Loveen Kishore? Well, Loveen Kishore appears not to be racing with us this week, and so the driver second in the points already, perhaps at a bit of a disadvantage, but this was again something that was kind of anticipated as we went through the season. Drivers may have to miss a round here or there because of other commitments. I know there is some consideration for implementing a drop score system to try and help out with that, which again we will have confirmation of moving forwards, but either way, Loveen Kishore not here, and he'll be watching along, presumably somewhere, wherever he is, and hoping that his championship rivals perhaps don't have such a strong night. Following here, Nathan Jensen, 13th fastest right now for Nathan, who finished 8th in the race at Silverstone, so you might anticipate a bit more pace from Nathan, but he stays in 12th place despite quite a chunk of time gained on that lap. He's just behind James Sherrington, who is the only driver in the pits. One car off in the background. I think that was Gabriel Doyle Parfait, whose car, it's a good job it's green, because it did spend a lot of time visiting the scenery at Silverstone. Not so much green stuff to drive over at Silverstone. Here at Donington, though, you don't have the luxury of those wide tarmac runoff areas. You go wide here, you're on the grass, you're in the gravel, and potentially making your way all the way to the tyre barriers. But as demanding a circuit as this is, as I said, it always does produce really good side-by-side sort of pack racing almost, especially these Citroen Saxos that are modelled so carefully after the real-world Junior Saloon Car Championship machines. Lewis Stannard's Citroen Saxo unfortunately parked at the side of the road, but these cars limited in speed to about 100 miles an hour, as is the rule in the UK for junior racing. Category aimed at 14 to 17-year-olds and growing in popularity season on season in real-world competition. This is its first esports series that it's run, officially in conjunction with the Junior Saloon Car Championship. And good to see a healthy entry with more drivers, we hope, on the way, moving deeper into the season. Charlie Constable goes 9th fastest then, so moves himself up ahead of Lewis Stannard, who we've seen is parked at the side of the road, and the significance of that is that if you stop out on the track somewhere, you are not allowed to recover to the pit lane under your own steam, so you can't hit the teleport back to pit lane button, which all of the drivers will have equipped, and it must be so tempting to do that, but it will result in a disqualification from the session. So unfortunately, if you crash and have too much damage to get back, or if you pull over with a hardware issue, or you've run out of fuel, which is something that can happen, especially in qualifying, the drivers will put as little fuel in the car as possible, then unfortunately you are stuck there. That seems to be what's happened to poor Lewis Stannard, who now slips down into 10th place. Riding on board there with Riley Bishop, still quickest by a 10th, making our way down towards the old hairpin. Let's ride on board with Riley and take a bird's eye view of the Donington Park National Circuit. This really fast flowing layout that, as I said, is a real driver's favourite, but it really does reward those drivers who have really good racecraft. Up towards McLean's corner now. To the right-hander, got to get that nose into the corner, which Riley does, just ditch hooks the curb on the inside slightly to help rotate the car. You can see that he's about a 10th of a second off his previous best through the first sector, and that won't have helped either. Missed the apex through Coppice, and that will really hurt his momentum out onto the exhibition straight. That's the exhibition centre itself, which is the building on the left. Into the braking zone at the Robert chicane. Very easy to get this wrong. Braking probably just after that crest. There you can see the nose dipping, turning in, hammers the curb on the right, hammers the curb on the left. Does he understeer off the track? No, that was judged quite nicely, but Riley Bishop losing a little bit of time on that lap, unfortunately, with a couple of little mistakes, and so I don't think that's going to be an improvement on a 27.702. We did see an improvement, though, for Jamie Petters, who jumped up into 4th position now. And look how tight that is. 2nd, 3rd and 4th, all well within a 10th of a second of each other. So CJ Morgan, dominant a week ago at Silverstone, not able to recreate that quite here this week. And he will be a driver who was pretty upset at the fact that second race didn't count, because he was on course for another maximum points haul. If he's not able to find quite that speed here this week, then he might look at that as a case of what could have been. Mosthav goes into 4th position, so demotes Jamie Petters down to 5th, but Petters looks like he might be about to improve perhaps with a couple of personal best sectors on that lap, but no, it all came to nothing in the end in the 2nd sector, and so he stays in 5th position for the time being, ahead of Stinter. Josh Salvadori is now in the top 10, ahead of Harley Connolly, Zach Palmer and Jack Sherrington. Harley Connolly was another driver who looked quick at Silverstone, but perhaps got involved in a couple of incidents, didn't ultimately, I feel, get the results that he probably deserved to get, eventually finishing that race in 7th place. Well, he's 8th at the moment in this qualifying session, and not improving on that lap. A good second half of the lap, but not good enough, ultimately, to move forward from 8th place. So, time ticking down to 0 then. The checkered flag is out, but again, drivers who are already on a lap are able to continue on that lap even after the checkered flag, and this is one driver who'll be grateful for that because Jordan Taylor is going pretty rapidly here. He's gone personal best in the 1st sector of this lap, and Jordan is already 3rd and only needs to find a fraction, half a tenth or so to get 2nd, but he's missed the braking point at the chicane. Is over the curbs, and Jordan Taylor is not going to improve on this lap. Needs to be careful not to get in the way of the driver behind him. Whoever that was will perhaps not be adding Jordan to their Christmas card list this year because Taylor wasn't exactly leaping out of the way. That might have been... no, I can't quite see who that was. But anyway, Jordan Taylor lucky to avoid being rear-ended. Coming through the chicane, it was Luke Stintler in the Jakins motorsport car. And Luke Stintler 6th at the end of his first qualifying session of the season. Here's Holly Connolly still pushing on, coming out of Coppice Corner. The yellow and black machine needs quite a chunk of time, doesn't it, really, to improve upon 8th. The top 7 are covered by, let's call that half a second. It's then another half a second back to 8th place Connolly. So, based on qualifying times, we might have a race of 2 parts here. Those top 7 all very evenly matched. Certainly close enough to each other on time that by running in the slipstream, they ought to be able to stay together in the race as well. And then the next 5 or 6 of them within half a second or so as well. So we should have 2 very close battle packs. The question will be whether anyone can break away from the first pack of cars and whether anyone in that second group is able to go after the front runners. So qualifying looking as though it's pretty much done. Riley Bishop unlikely to be challenged now, I would say, for his pole position. And Riley, who at Silverstone qualified 5th fastest, but did manage to race his way onto the podium, will be starting considerably further forward this time, and he joins us now in the commentary box. Riley, thank you for stepping in here to have a chat. Excellent job there in qualifying, 1/10 of a second to the good at the end of the qualifying session, and a championship point going your way, but the real work begins now, doesn't it? How confident are you about this first race? Well, we're not hearing Riley. Riley, if you're there, then we'd love to know what your thoughts are about the first race of the night. Have you got us, Riley? And answer came there, none. So we'll try one more time then, whilst we've got a minute or so before the opening race of the night starts, and give Riley an opportunity to reset his microphone. Hopefully, Riley, have you got us? Of course, many of these drivers new to sim racing, as I've said, and perhaps new to the interviewing method that we have using Discord for our broadcasts. So, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get hold of Riley Bishop, but let it be known, Riley, if you can hear us, that we were very impressed with that qualifying effort, and we wish you the very best of luck for the opening race of the night. So, shame that we didn't get to hear from Riley, and let's hope that if he makes it onto the podium, he'll get his audio issues sorted out, because it would be nice to hear from him. He'll certainly be hoping for a podium at the very least in this opening race, starting as he is alongside the championship leader CJ Morgan at the front of the grid. The cars, as you can see, are already lining up anyway, so in reality we wouldn't have had a huge amount of time to chat to the pole sitter. And he will be lining up on the pole position in a moment or two. So Riley Bishop then with the pole, CJ Morgan alongside, as I've said, and then a couple of sort of new faces, if you like, to the front. Jordan Taylor is another driver who did not race with us at Silverstone, but he's managed to qualify 3rd on the grid. And Alexander Mosthav did race with us at Silverstone, but I seem to recall ended up off the road early on in that opening race. and never really was able to fully recover. So they're both drivers really with very little to lose, and really just looking to try and establish themselves as front runners within the championship. And this is one of the things that I touched upon a week ago at Silverstone that I was really looking forward to in this championship. Being a junior series, there are always some drivers who are slow burners and perhaps take a few weeks to get going, and there are those who are quick right out of the gate, and it's always fascinating seeing some drivers getting better as the season goes on. There is your grid then, lining up Riley Bishop, CJ Morgan, Jordan Taylor, Alexander Mostav, Jamie Petters and Luke Stintler together on row 3, ahead of Josh Salvadori and Holly Connolly, that will be. Zach Palmer and Jamie Sherrington next, ahead of Charlie Constable, Lewis Stannard, Nathan Jensen, Jensen Bell, Gabriel Doyle Parfait at the back of the field. So 15 drivers ready and raring to go, 20 minutes the distance, and don't forget that our second race of the night is a full reversed grid. So we take every driver who finishes race 1 and we reverse their running order to give us the grid for race number 2. Got Thorne, our safety car driver, ready and waiting as well, should he be needed. If we do have an incident out on track, we can throw the safety car. Let's hope that doesn't happen, though, as round number 2 of the JSCC official E-Series bursts into life here at Donington Park, and Riley Bishop and CJ Morgan go head-to-head on the long run down to Redgate Corner. The inside line for the pole sitter, but look at that, that's Jordan Taylor coming through from the second row of the grid. Taylor with a much better start. CJ Morgan is into the lead and just about manages to cover off the black machine, which got off the line like a rocket. Jamie Petters is up the inside of Bishop as well, so all of that hard work in qualifying for Bishop unfortunately is undone, and he immediately finds himself down in the pack. But as we saw at Silverstone, this is definitely not one of those championships where you get stuck single file with no overtaking. He has every chance of gaining this ground. First of all, needs to try and fend off Jamie Petters, who is still up the inside of him through the old hairpin. They just about avoid contact, and Riley Bishop, with some real commitment, hangs on the outside line. James Sherrington is out on the grass. There's a bit of a hip check. Someone exiting stage right, and that was Charlie Constable, who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They are still 3 wide heading to Schwantz Curve, and I think it was this little pack of cars that all came together, and Constable ended up off the road. Now it's Harley Connolly sideways, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times he has contact, still hasn't saved it. Back into the pack he goes. This is the world's longest accident, and unfortunately it's happening to Harley Connolly, who ricochets off the barriers, rejoins the track, sort of, maybe, well, not quite, cuts across the inside at Coppice, and will rejoin in a battle likely with Charlie Constable, the other driver who visited the Donington scenery on lap 1. There's another car going off the road down the straight, presumably with some damage. That was one of the cars involved in that previous bit of contact, Lewis Stannard, and his car perhaps not handling quite as it should do after that little bit of pargy on the opening lap. I was just about to say those infamous words. It had been a clean start until we got out of the old hairpin, and then in the end, as wide as Donington Park is, there just wasn't quite the space for what the drivers were all trying to do there, and no give or take in junior racing, as we see so often, and that was on display there. One lap has been completed by the race leaders, though, and CJ Morgan trying to check out in much the way that he did at Donington. He's being helped by the fact that 2nd, 3rd and 4th places are all tripping over each other. It's Jordan Taylor in 2nd, back into 3rd goes Jamie Petters, but a brilliant switchback manoeuvre by Riley Bishop puts him back alongside towards Starkey's corner. He is on the right-hand side of the road. That will become the inside for McLean's if he needs it, but he doesn't, because he's cleared Petters already, and back into 3rd place. As entertaining as this battling is, though, it's playing beautifully into the hands of CJ Morgan, who is already 1 second up the road from the rest of the pack behind. Jensen Bell there in the 871 car, running in 11th. He's got Josh Salvadori ahead of him. Salvadori was a lot quicker than this at Silverstone, and unfortunately, again, wasn't really able to show what he could do, having got involved in a couple of incidents. This time he's just a little bit off the pace, it seems. Donington, a really challenging circuit, a real momentum circuit as well, and particularly in junior racing, where the cars are limited in horsepower, as I mentioned earlier on. If you make a mistake around here, it will cost you a lot of momentum for quite a long time. Now, safety car boards are out, and we are going to bunch the field back together. There is Scott Thorne, the BMW, pulling out of pit lane, and CJ Morgan sees that sight that race leaders around the world dread. He was already pulling out a nice lead, and suddenly all of that hard work is undone. Immediately, though, starts to weave around behind the safety car. to get some heat into the tyres. So CJ Morgan then leads the way after the first couple of laps of racing. Jordan Taylor second though, and having made that really good start, I think Jordan will be a little disappointed maybe that he wasn't able to stick with CJ. As I said, that was really just because he was busy defending from Bishop and Petters behind. This now gives Jordan an opportunity to close back in on the race leader. Bishop third, Petters fourth, Sintler in fifth. Haven't mentioned him yet in the race, but the newcomer holding well in fifth position, the black and red Jenkins car. And it's Alexander Mostav, Zach Palmer, James Sherrington, their ninth position for Nathan Jensen, and Josh Salvadori is in 10th ahead of Bell, Stannard, Connolly, Constable and Doyle Parfait. Of course, this safety car period also giving some of those who were in strife on the opening lap an opportunity to repair their cars if they need to by visiting the pit lane, or to simply close in on the back of the pack. Now, CJ Morgan is going out of his way here to make sure he's got some temperature in those tyres. Really vigorous weaving going on for the race leader as he tries to heat not just the front but the rear tyres as well. The lights are out on the BMW safety car though, so it is just going to be a very brief safety car interruption and we're ready to go racing once again. And CJ Morgan, oh dear, well, that's not ideal. Lewis Stannard is off again, this time from behind the safety car. He gets spat out of the pack. He obviously checked up and the cars behind didn't quite realise what was going on, but you can see how that can happen. It's a very slow pace being taken here by CJ Morgan, as is his right to do. Once the safety car pulls away, he becomes the pace setter, and only now does he hit the loud pedal, turning into the Robert chicane. That was a pretty good restart, actually. He's built up 3/10 already over Jordan Taylor, but that is well within slipstreaming range, and Jordan will be aiming to be right back on the leader's bumper by the time they arrive at Redgate Corner. Surprise, surprise, it's the fight for third, though, that is about to ignite once more. Jamie Petters is back up the inside of Riley Bishop, who is later on the brakes into Redgate Corner. It's going to be Jamie on the inside line, and now watch for Stintler up the inside too. He saw a gap, it wasn't quite big enough. There's a bit of contact. Stintler is sideways, Bishop out on the grass, and they rejoin still in the same order. In fact, Stintler falling behind Mostav now as they drop through Hollywood and the Craner curves. So Stintler with an opportunistic move attempted. There's more contact through the Craners though, and this could be a big one. James Sherrington is sideways, so too is Nathan Jensen, who will just avoid the barriers, but again 3 wide through the Craner curves is not advisable, and that was just another example of that momentum shifting that I mentioned earlier on. It's such a feature of racing at Donington Park. Ollie Connolly on the grass again, and has to be careful on the rejoin. All of the drivers have been warned about how they rejoin the track should they have some contact, and I don't think Harley Connolly appreciated that bit of contact that he had with Charlie Constable, because he just dishes a little bit more of that out through McLean's corner. Settles back in behind. But yeah, the momentum here at Donington is just so crucial, and as soon as one driver has a moment, whatever that moment may be, a bit of contact or going for a move that doesn't quite work, it loses then momentum, it stacks up the group of cars behind, and you so frequently get those 3 wide situations where someone ultimately has to give. No one giving in this battle, as Harley Connolly and Lewis Stannard make contact. Gabriel Doyle Parfait says thank you very much, I will gain 2 free positions and move into the top 10. So Doyle Parfait keeping his nose clean, unlike some of those around him, and managing to benefit from it. So through the first corner we go again. Josh Salvadori's gained some places out of all of this too. He was 7th, but that little headbutt from Zach Palmer will do him no favours, and he drops back behind the 333 car as they run through Hollywood once again. At the head of the field though, CJ Morgan is not escaping this time. Jordan Taylor and Jamie Petters very much going with him. The driver who is struggling a little is the 4th place man, Riley Bishop, who just can't quite live with their pace right now. And Alexander Mostav might have ideas of sneaking even a place away from the driver ahead. Zach Palmer, meanwhile, and Josh Salvadori continuing their private battle for 7th, and, well, Josh goes off the track, in fairness, there to avoid contact with Zach Palmer, bounces his way back out wide, and this is for the race lead, and again, the momentum shifting at the front of the field. CJ Morgan must have had a mistake somewhere, because Jordan Taylor was up the inside at Coppice Corner. That didn't work. It checked up Jamie Petters, and suddenly Riley Bishop in the Mini Bish racing car has the best run of the lot. He's in the slipstream towards the Robert chicane, looks to the outside line. Now, that won't work, but he might try and get the switch back on the exit of the corner, fire off the chicane a bit more quickly than Jamie Petters, who will surely have to defend the inside line. Riley wants the inside, but there's no way Jamie is going to give it to him, and a bit of a brake test there was that from Jamie. That won't go down too well. Riley, though, capitalises on that to get to the outside line. Bit of a squeeze going into Redgate corner. Again, someone will have to give here. You're not going to go around the outside of somebody at Redgate, and Riley's about to find out why, because he gets shown the edge of the road by Jamie Petters. In fairness, though, they both keep going, and Riley will eventually have to slot back in behind the 322 machine. Cars 322 and 32 completely inseparable so far in this race. They have traded this third place more times than I can remember, and we are not even halfway through yet. How wide onto the grass goes Bishop, just desperately searching for a Saxo-sized hole that he can slip through. Has to be careful though. A bit of contact here could be disastrous for both of them. Alexander Mostav is waiting in the wings. You can see him in the mirror, the white car in 5th place, just itching for an opportunity to get past these two. That opportunity may well come if they keep on dicing in this manner. Interested to know what happened to CJ Morgan a lap ago though, because I know I'd commented that he didn't have a big lead over Jordan Taylor, but he had a few car lengths and then suddenly he didn't. So that also triggered by, I suspect, a bit of a moment for the race leader, but he weathered the storm and actually now has a bigger lead than he's had since the safety car. Nearly 9/10 of a second over Taylor as they drop through the Robert chicane for the 6th time. Hammering the curbs then, out onto the start-finish straight once again. I have to say the driving standards at the front of the field have been pretty good so far in this race. Minimal contact, everyone leaving space in the background. Meanwhile, lots of very interesting lines being taken out of the Robert chicane. Gabriel Doyle-Parfait was one car off the road. Charlie Constable, the white-fronted car, was another. And he's the big loser out of all of that. Harley Connolly comes back through to 9th. And Lewis Stannard back into the top 10, having a bit of a yo-yo race, it must be said. As is Charlie Constable. Every time he starts to gain some ground up after that lap 1 incident, he seems to go backwards again. Stannard out wide through Redgate, having just got past Harley Connolly. Looks like he used a fairly inventive line through Redgate to get that done, but he's already starting to get away from Harley. Drop down the hill into the old hairpin. Now, Jamie Petters, the, well, inside through Schwantz, but that's the outside at McLean's of Jordan Taylor. If these two were thinking about big picture, they would work together here, but they are definitely not. There's more Morse code tapped onto the rear quarter of Jordan Taylor's car, and Jamie Petters clearly feels that he is quicker here, but they're battling, they're losing time, and that lead gap is up over a second now. Riley Bishop won't go away either, and Alexander Mostav continuing to have a grandstand view of this three-way fight for the lower podium places, but that is all they will ever be fighting over unless they work together to try and close in on CJ Morgan. He's not that far ahead. They're probably still picking up a hint of a slipstream maybe. And actually, if they just left Jordan Taylor alone for a lap or two, I think he might be able to pull the whole train back up there. But these are teenagers, don't forget. They're unlikely to be thinking like that. And Jamie Petters certainly isn't. He's back up the inside at Redgate Corner. And that actually was a really good bit of driving. He just about found a chink in the armour of Jordan Taylor. And he slips through into second. As long as he doesn't run too wide on the exit, he'll be okay. Chops across to the inside at Hollywood. But the momentum lies with Taylor. And he will take the fight back to Petters. Down through the Craner curves. Riley Bishop there with them as well. This is very, very close quarters racing indeed. Let's keep it clean, everyone. Little bit of paint being traded, but nothing too significant. And they go side by side through the old hairpin. There is the inevitable contact. Around, I'm afraid, goes Jamie Petters in front of everybody. Will they all miss him? Somehow they do. Mostav and Stintler having the closest calls. And Jamie Petters, unfortunately, dropping down to 8th place. You could sort of see that coming. It's a shame, but the three of them under such a small blanket heading into the old hairpin, you kind of had a feeling that was going to end in tears, and sadly it was Jamie Petters who ended up down the road. And Jamie perhaps had been the quickest driver in that group, just never was quite able to establish himself at the front of it, and now finds himself falling down into 8th position. But that could have been a lot worse, in fairness, and at least he's still got a car that's more or less in one piece, so he can maybe gain some ground up from there. He'll be aiming to close in on Josh Salvadori and Zach Palmer, but you can see the real estate that he has to bridge in order to catch these two. This will help though. Zach Palmer having a big snap of oversteer into the Robert chicane, and that will kill his momentum out onto the pit straight, so already Jamie Petters starting to sense an opportunity maybe to gain a position or two before the flag. Nothing else Jamie can think about that reverse grid race where he currently is set to start significantly further up the order than some of those with whom he was just fighting. last lap around for Zach Palmer understeering wide at Redgate as well. I don't think Zach is particularly happy with the handling of his Vinasport Citroen Saxo right now. And he will lose a bit more time to Jamie Petters. You can see that delta starting to creep down all the time on the timing tower to the left-hand side of the screen. I was about to mention lap times at the front of the field. CJ Morgan on the previous lap was a full 4-5 tenths quicker than Jordan Taylor, so 1.5 seconds is now the gap, and Taylor still can't catch a break because Riley Bishop is still pretty close to him. There is the second and third place battle. Then for fourth, Mostab has been caught by Stintler. Now, in fairness to Alexander, he probably, well, who am I kidding, definitely had to hit the brakes to avoid the spinning Jamie Petters. That will have cost him some time, and it's just cost him enough time to allow Luke Stintler onto his rear bumper, but this is a much better showing from Alexander Mostab, who managed only 14th at Silverstone, but is now really showing his true potential, running solidly inside the top 5, and he'd like to keep it that way if at all possible. Robert chicane they go, Stintler a little bit wide, and well, that's again interesting interpretation of track limits regulations through the chicane, but in fairness, they're all kind of doing it, and I'm not convinced they're gaining any time out of it either, because they're passing over the curbs, that slows them down, running on the grass, that slows them down. So although it looks like a blatant disregard for track limits, I'm not actually convinced they're getting anything out of it. Petters looking to try and get one more place at least out of this race though. And he will perhaps be feeling that if he gets past Mostab, he might have half a chance of catching these two, because I sense some battling in our near future between Jordan Taylor and Riley Bishop. Bishop never happy, it seems, unless he's going side by side with somebody, and he's got another playmate in front of him now. Gabriel Doyle Parfait, he's always been good so far this season anyway for action. If ever the race is looking a bit dull, you can focus on him, but I really think the great entertainer in this race has been Riley Bishop, as again he's on the attack, looking to the outside of Jordan Taylor into McLean's corner. Any thought of working with Jordan to chase after the leader is not even entered his head, let's be honest. But in fairness, with 5 minutes to go, I'm not convinced CJ Morgan can be caught, so second place likely to be all they're fighting for. The worry here for Riley, though, is that once he goes on the attack and Jordan starts driving defensively, not only do they lose time to CJ, but they also lose time to Mostab and Stintler behind. Now, I know this is a race, I do understand that, they're obviously going to try and overtake each other, but Riley needs to be certain, when he makes the move, needs to be certain that it's going to work, and they're not just going to get stuck side by side for 2 or 3 corners. Mostab and Stintler, though, are going to be side by side, because Alexander got it all wrong through the chicane, ran out onto the grass, and so Luke Stintler has the momentum. He's got the outside line into Redgate, but I think he's cleared the 888 car already, and unless Mostab has a real last of the late breakers moment, which he tried, he wasn't going to be able to get back through on the inside, and Alexander locking up the rear brakes in his desperation to avoid contact, and Gabriel Doyle Parfait off the road again, this time at the Roberts chicane, and well, he was just waiting for a gap in the traffic to rejoin into, thankfully, so his race is not over. At the moment, he will be starting on pole position for race 2, so all is not lost. Leaders back through the old hairpin once again. Riley Bishop and Jordan Taylor separated by virtually nothing. Bishop, can he find a way through into second place? They are still managing to catch CJ Morgan somehow, don't ask me how, but they've taken about half a second, I think, out of CJ on this lap so far. Might just tempt Riley into sitting behind Jordan. You can even use a bit of bump drafting in these cars, perhaps, where the driver behind sort of pushes the car in front along down the straight. So if they're going to do it, then the exhibition straight is a good point on the track on which to do it. First sector, they were a little bit quicker than CJ. Closer they get, the more of that slipstream they start to pick up, and perhaps the more of a threat they become to the race leader. That gap has visibly come down from the 1.5, 1.6 seconds that it once was. Riley Bishop really using all of the curb there through the Robert chicane, but let's have a look at these lap times then, because I think that gap has come down significantly on that lap. It was a 28.59 for CJ Morgan, a 28.0 for Jordan Taylor, so he was nearly 6 tenths quicker than CJ Morgan that time. I don't know if Morgan had a mistake, maybe he's used his tyres up too much, whatever it is though, this race is not over, and Riley Bishop now may be tempted just to sit behind Jordan for another lap and see if they can get to the leaders. I think it's doable as long as they don't keep battling each other too hard. You can see now they're well within slipstreaming range, and CJ Morgan suddenly has quite a lot to think about in this first race of the night. Riley Phillips out a little bit wide through the old hairpin. But is there a twist in the tail in this second round of the Junior Saloon Car Championship official eSeries? CJ Morgan, many thought would be a dominant force this season after his, well, dominant performance at Silverstone a week ago. But here at Donington Park, yes, he's leading. He didn't start on pole position, remember. That was Riley Bishop, and he is being reeled in here in the closing stages. Up the hill they go, through the right-hander at Coppice Corner. And again, this is where that slipstream now starts to take effect. It does seem that the slipstream's pretty powerful in these cars. The gap going onto the straight, about 0.6 of a second. We'll see what it is at the end. Jensen Bell has been around, and I suspect Harley Connolly was perhaps involved in that, since he is also off the pace. And Nathan Jensen will manage to take 11th place away from him for the time being. Leaders coming out of the Robert chicane. Are they any closer to CJ Morgan? This will be, well, will it be the final lap? Maybe not. They're lapping in the 1:28s, and I think there was 1:29 left on the clock. This is going to be really touch and go for CJ Morgan. The checkered flag can't come quickly enough, but for Jordan Taylor and Riley Bishop, who I think are now working together, they've formed at least a temporary truce, he says, as they make contact coming out of Redgate Corner. Yeah, no, okay, maybe not. This is either Jamie Petters trying to get through or trying to push Jordan down the Crater curves. You know how I said bump drafting could work down the straights? I certainly wouldn't recommend it down through the Crater curves, and actually the gap just creeping out again slightly now. They were 0.2 quicker than the leader on the previous lap, but yeah, Riley, I think his patience has run out now, and he wants to try and find a way through. Weaves around from the inside to the outside. This is the left-hand side, the inside through Schwann's curve. Jordan needs to leave the space because Riley was always going to try and muscle his way through. Thankfully, they avoided major contact. Defensive line into McLean's for Taylor does not work, and now he comes back across on Riley Bishop again. Oh, Jordan Taylor desperate to hang on to second place. He's gaining on the leader again on this lap, but he needs to be careful. If Riley is alongside, then you have to leave the space. You're perfectly entitled to defend your position as long as there's no overlap, but Jordan just running the risk there, I think, of finding himself in the steward's office after tonight's racing is done. No major harm done. Riley is still there, but Riley will argue that that was an opportunity to overtake that was taken away from him. Either way, this race I think is going to have one more lap to go, isn't it? 3, 2, 1. This is going to be so close. Was that a checkered flag? It was not. So we are now on to the final lap of the race. That was about as close as it could be. James Sherrington off the road. So James Sherrington, who was running, I think, outside of the top 10, is unfortunately going no further. He might be out of the race altogether. And of course, with this extra lap that they're doing now, this does bring fuel mileage back into question, because the drivers will have calculated how many laps they were likely to do. The safety car earlier on will have saved them a bit of fuel, but now they are perhaps doing one more lap than they expected. Josh Salvador, I look, is dropping down the timing tower as well, and I think he's out of fuel. He's going very slowly through the chicane, and I wonder if a few drivers have miscalculated the fuel that they needed to get through this 20-minute race. Let's hope this doesn't happen to any of the race leaders. There is Sherrington's car. Look at the way that Stintler has closed in as well. This is now very much a three-way fight for second. I think CJ Morgan is okay out in front, but second, third and fourth could not be a lot closer with less than half a lap to go. Up through Coppice Corner, this isn't really an overtaking opportunity, but the exit is crucial, and it won't be a good exit for Taylor because he's sideways again. There's not much room left for Bishop, and here comes Stintler up the inside of both of them. Luke Stintler on his first race in the championship might have a chance at second place. Doesn't quite have the overlap on Jordan Taylor, who will defend second for now, but Luke Stintler onto the podium as he goes into the final corner. It's going to be about the run to the line for those three. They pass the stricken car on the exit of the chicane of Josh Salvador. It is a race victory for CJ Morgan. Second will go to Jordan Taylor, and Luke Stintler steals a podium finish on the final lap. Fantastic stuff. Riley Bishop in fourth after all that fighting and having qualified on pole position, doesn't even end up on the podium after all. Fifth position goes to Alexander Mostav, sixth Jamie Petters, seventh Zach Palmer, Lewis Stannard, Harley Connolly and Nathan Jensen I think are going to round out the top 10. We're just waiting for the last of those two to make it through. Harley Connolly ricocheting off the curbs at the chicane, and will come across the line indeed in ninth ahead of Nathan Jensen, both of them having issues in that race. The other Jensen Bell, coming home in 11th position. And that was a fantastic race. A little bit too much contact perhaps further back, but at the front, genuinely a really good fight. CJ Morgan, I think, can count himself a little bit lucky there. Through the second half of that race, I don't think he was as quick as the two drivers behind. They just weren't really willing to work together for long enough to catch him. But CJ knows that a win is a win, no matter how you get it, and will be very, very happy with that. So too will Jordan Taylor. Fairly robust defence of second place, but an entertaining one nonetheless. And as for Luke Stintler, as I said, didn't race with us at Silverstone a week ago, but he has arrived in the championship with a bang and manages to snatch that third place away from Riley Bishop on the final lap of the race. Riley will be a bit frustrated with that, I suspect. Having qualified on pole, you're at the very least hoping for a podium. In fact, I think I said that at the start of the race, but it isn't always meant to be. Well, as the drivers make their way back into the pit lane, we can catch up with our podium finishers, I believe, after our first race of the night. And our race winner, CJ Morgan, joins us now in the commentary box. Well, CJ, another race, another win, but that one didn't look like it was quite as straightforward as Silverstone. You had a real fight there, and it looked to me like maybe you would have an even bigger one in the closing stages. Were you concerned at all about that gap coming down?
100%, Andy. My tyres just started going off towards the end of the race, really, and lost a bit of pace, but luckily they started fighting behind me and I managed to just keep the gap.
That's interesting then, you mentioned tyres, because a lot of people will look at these cars and assume that they don't really take too much out of the tyres at all. That obviously isn't the case.
Yeah, it's definitely not the case, especially the front tyres. They're really the main hitter because it's a front wheel drive and you're keeping such a high speed throughout all the corners around this track. It builds a lot of heat into the front tyres, so ideally it would be best if they didn't heat up to the full extent, because then they go like balloons, you can't turn in, but it's definitely got a big effect.
And of course, you're not really going to be in a position in race 2 now to manage that tyre situation coming from the back of the grid. You did make really good progress at Silverstone in the reverse grid race. It ended up not counting for anything, but you've shown us once that you can do it. Bit tighter round here though, isn't it? A bit trickier maybe to make that progress?
Yeah, 100%, but don't you worry, Andy, I've got my ways to manage the tyres, and you just watch and wait for the race, see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that second victory of the season. We'll wish you the best of luck for race 2 and perhaps speak to you again later on.
Thank you, Andy.
CJ Morgan then, our race winner here at Donington Park. We move straight on to our runner-up, and Jordan Taylor, you had a fight on your hands in that race. You were not wanting to give that second place up to anyone. You managed to hang on to the flag. Talk us through that race from your perspective.
Yeah, that was, well, I wouldn't say chaotic, but it was a very interesting race to say the least. I think at one point we were 3 wide down Craners. It was very hectic, but I think we kept it clean. Hopefully no one gets any penalties, but including the safety car, I was catching CJ, and then after the safety car, I think CJ is very good at the restarts. I don't know how he does it, but I was a bit slow, and then I got caught. But if I didn't get caught, I think I might have had a chance at CJ.
Yeah, it did look like that gap was coming down and you and Riley maybe were working together for a lap or so, but that's so tricky, isn't it? You want to work with someone to try and close in on the leader, but you get that run and you kind of have to go for the move, don't you? And it was a great battle to watch between you and Riley. So hard as well to keep it clean around a track like this in particular when you're running that close together. We really enjoy watching it, but I'd imagine from the driver's seat it can be a bit stressful.
Oh yeah, only a little bit. Nothing much. But yeah, just also with it being online, the hitboxes, it makes it a lot harder because sometimes it might not look like you hit them, but you did in the game, and it's just trying to make sure you're not too close without having that issue.
Your thoughts for race 2 now then? Just chatted to CJ about the challenges of these reverse grid races. Of course, this is your first time racing with us, so what's your game plan? Slow and steady or full attack?
Well, full attack, but pick them off one by one. I don't want to win it in the first corner. It's a 20-minute race, and I'll see what I can do.
That sounds like a good plan to me. Jordan, congratulations on the podium and best of luck for race 2.
Thank you, Andy.
So there we have it then, our top 2 finishers in that first race of the day, and they will be starting therefore from towards the tail end of the grid for race 2. We aren't, it appears, going to have a chance to chat to Luke Stintler, unfortunately, but he will be aiming perhaps for another podium here in the second race, which will be getting underway very shortly. As you can see, that looks like Charlie Constable then, who's going to get himself on the pole position for race number 2. Alongside him, Gabriel Doyle-Parfait, with Jensen Bell and Nathan Jensen behind. Then Harley Connolly and Lewis Stannard, Zach Palmer and Jamie Petters. He's one to watch for here, I think. Jamie Petters, after that contact that he had down at the old hairpin, really sort of took him out of contention for a podium finish. He's got pace and starting ahead of those with whom he was battling in race 1. Then it's Alexander Mostav and Riley Bishop, with Stintler, Taylor and Morgan, the top 3 from that race, starting 11th, 12th and 13th. And of course we did have a few non-finishers because of their issues towards the end of that race. Josh Salvadori and James Sherrington, namely, who will both have to come from the back of the field. So red lights then are on, our second race of the night getting underway, and one or two of them a little bit more on their toes at the start than others. Looks as though Charlie Constable will hold on to the lead heading towards Redgate Corner, whilst Jensen Bell, the blue and white striped car, gets up the inside of the green machine of Gabriel Doyle Parfait, or attempts to anyway. The second phase of the start working quite well for Gabriel, who has that outside line into Redgate. They all concertina together. This is always nervy stuff on the opening lap. Now, I hesitate to say this perhaps, but the first lap of race 2 at Silverstone was a lot cleaner than the opening race of the night. Let's hope they keep that up here at Donington, although I'm not holding my breath because we've got contact through the Crater curves, and that is going to be almost Jamie Petters going around. Nathan Jensen is sideways in the middle of the pack, and he will exit onto the gravel track down at the Old Hairpin, but very lucky actually not to catch more drivers in that. Now there's more contact there coming out of the Old Hairpin. Mostav, I think, getting involved. Lewis Stannard is on the grass too. And again, somehow they all keep going in vaguely the right direction. Riley Bishop, you can see, is stuck in the middle of that. So is Luke Stintler, neither of whom have made that much progress. CJ Morgan has, though. He is Knight, and around goes another car. That was Jensen Bell, sideways, pointing the wrong way out of McLean's corner. Again, recovers it, but will fall pretty much to the tail of the field as they continue to run door handle to door handle through Coppice Corner and out onto the exhibition straight. As I was about to say, CJ Morgan has made good progress into 7th, but Jordan Taylor has very much gone with him. They continue to run together. 6th for Taylor, 7th for CJ Morgan, but CJ has not escaped from this second pack, whereas Jordan Taylor has. You can see CJ turning in the first of the white cars at the front of this second group, just ahead of James Sherrington. Another car around, and that's Stintler. Luke Stintler, 3rd place in race 1, but his chances of a double podium have just taken a bit of a knock with a rotation coming out of the Robert chicane. Up towards Redgate Corner they go again. Jamie Petters up the inside of Jordan Taylor. Actually, this is Taylor trying to get past Petters, isn't it, on the outside line. So Jamie Petters, who, as I said, started ahead of those with whom he was fighting in the earlier race. Well, that advantage hasn't lasted for long because he's got Taylor right behind him. CJ Morgan's not that far back, and then the next car behind him is about to be Riley Bishop, I think, if he can clear James Sherrington through the Crater curves. The turquoise car has the inside line, and Sherrington makes it very easy for him by dipping a wheel on the grass into the Old Hairpin. Flames spitting out of the back of the Saxo as he stamps on the throttle to try and gather it all together, which he does, but loses a bit of time. Right, this is the lead battle, and it's Gabriel Doyle Parfait who leads. Harley Connolly there going around the outside of the pole sitter, Charlie Constable. There is perhaps a little bit of contact, and here comes Zach Palmer. Zach Palmer picks the pocket of both of them, whilst behind Jamie Petters and Jordan Taylor are almost banging doors as well, just keeping it clean on the run towards Coppice Corner and out onto the exhibition straight again. Very hard fought stuff in the early stages. They all know the significance of the early track position that you can gain, and it is important to try and gain that ground early on. Out wide, that is well, Charlie Constable's gone off as well, so it's all kicking off. Constable went off, so too did that was Harley, was it not, who also ran out onto the grass, Harley Connolly. And so that will shuffle the order around once more, with Gabriel Doyle Parfait now leading from Zach Palmer, but Petters is 3rd, Morgan is 4th, and then that's Jordan Taylor in 5th. Nathan Jensen is in the pit lane. So Nathan Jensen's race is not going to plan at the moment, must be said. And this, though, the fight for the lead, and this is going to plan for Zach Palmer. If he can clear Gabriel Doyle Parfait, which he's trying to, into the Old Hairpin they will go. Really quick right-hander, over the curbs he goes, and Doyle Parfait off the ideal racing line, ran out of grip, got sideways, and now gets a tap in the tail from CJ Morgan. That ricochets him across the road in front of Jordan Taylor, who gives him a massive punt up the hill. That almost gave Gabriel Doyle Parfait an extra 50 brake horsepower. He goes back ahead of Zach Palmer, who I suspect must have missed a gear or something, because Zach was noticeably slower than the green machine heading towards Schwant's curve. And Zach Palmer now finds himself in a world of trouble because he's got 3 of the fastest drivers on the track queuing up behind him, and not queuing up in a particularly orderly fashion either, it must be said. CJ Morgan is ahead of Jordan Taylor again now, and Riley Bishop is right there. So they were 3 of our challengers at the front of the field in race 1, and they've all found each other again here in the early stages of the second race. Onto the brakes then. Through the Robert chicane, Petters leading, Doyle Parfait a second behind him. So Jamie Petters somehow has managed to get himself to the front, and that was kind of what I suspected was there was a possibility of happening. Someone into the pit lane in the background. That was Stannard, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, Lewis Stannard is in. Penalty, perhaps, or damage, I'm not so sure. He joins Charlie Constable, who's already in there, almost certainly as a result of some damage sustained in the early stages. Doyle Parfait is off again through Redgate, and that hands second place to Palmer, third to Morgan, fourth to Taylor, and maybe fifth to Riley Bishop. Riley Bishop has that momentum down the hill, and that goes to show you how important that momentum is. These cars don't accelerate very quickly at all because of the limited power that they have. And that means that if you do make a mistake, as Zach Palmer has just done, it will likely cost you more than one position. So CJ Morgan is now back into second place again. And Taylor and Bishop just following him through. This is easy for those three. They're not really having to work too hard for these positions right now. But the next one they will have to work hard for, because Jamie Petters is 2.5 seconds ahead of them. So they've got to catch him first, and that will require a little bit of organisation from those three. And then, of course, they've got to try and work away past him. And as we heard from CJ Morgan after race 1, tyre management is something they have to consider in these cars, particularly around tracks like this one, like Silverstone International, which are predominantly tracks made up of right-handers. You really don't turn left very much here at Donington. And when you do, you're not taking much out of the right front tyre. But when you're turning right, that left front really takes a beating. And as we heard from CJ, it's the tyre pressures, really, that are the issue, more than actual wear. And that is something that Assetto Corsa is known for as well. The tyre model being very temperature and pressure sensitive. Ooh, that's a bit of a squeeze from Jordan Taylor. Riley Bishop back to the outside of him again. Now, these two had a few run-ins in race 1. They, I think, are probably going to have a few more in race 2 as well. And if they keep on doing this, I know I sound like a broken record, but they're already allowing CJ to just escape by a few car lengths in front of them. And you don't need to give CJ Morgan much of an advantage before you lose him altogether. CJ is gaining slowly on Petters too. Remember I said that was 2.5 seconds a lap ago. It's down to 2.2, so 3/10 gain that time. The point I was about to make about tyres as Harley Connolly goes grass tracking. The exit of the old hairpin and does not lift out of the throttle for even a second, and that's why he ends up on the grass again on the other side of the road, heading towards Schwantz Curve. Gabriel Doyle Parfait closes in, but is not quite close enough to find a way past, although now he will, because Harley Connolly understeers off the road, and that already strikes me as a driver who is either overdriving or who has perhaps overheated those front tyres already. The point that I never seem to have the chance to finish about tyres is that CJ Morgan, Jordan Taylor, Riley Bishop, they may well have the pace to close in on Jamie Petters, but what damage will they do to their tyres closing that gap? If Jamie is smart here, he won't overdrive trying to manage the gap. He will simply allow them to close in by a few tenths of a second a lap, knowing that they are taking more life out of their tyres than he is. That's the sensible approach, but that's a lot easier for me to say from the comfort of the commentary box than it is for Jamie on his sim behind the wheel, who will be feeling the pressure now for sure. Jamie Petters was one of many drivers in strife at Silverstone, finishing outside of the top 10 in that race. And of course, we saw him have the spin in race 1 here tonight. Managed to stay inside the top 10 at least, but would have definitely hoped for a little bit better than that. Down towards the old hairpin we go once again. And CJ Morgan, our race 1 winner, who we know ran out of tyres a little bit towards the end of that one. He's now in a position where he has no choice but to push, because he's got to try and catch Jamie Petters, which actually he isn't doing anymore. And he's also got to try and keep Jordan Taylor at bay. Harley Connolly and Gabriel Doyle Parfait, two drivers who have had their fair share of moments already this season, and we're already in the 3rd race. Oh, and that was ambitious from Harley, and he's going to get one straight back as Gabriel Doyle Parfait was completely out of control, and that was fairly predictable, I'm afraid. And Harley Connolly, fairness, saw a bit of a gap, but that was a fairly low percentage move, I think, and the contact was fairly inevitable. Up the inside of James Sherrington there goes Lewis Stannard, and they now have caught the struggling Connolly and Doyle Parfait, and there's another car at the inside now. That's the recovering Nathan Jensen. They're going 3 wide, and they've got Harley Connolly, who's still not fully up to speed, right in front of them. Again, something will have to give. I suspect none of them will give way to the chicane, and nope, steaming up the inside goes Lewis Stannard. Elbows one car off the road. Stannard himself is the one actually who comes out of that worse with a spin, and he will fall again to the back of the pack. You can't fault them for going for it. No one is just settling for position in this championship, are they? Again, the young age of these drivers, perhaps the reason behind that, but again, it must be said, the driving that we're seeing out of people like CJ Morgan, people like Riley Bishop, Jordan Taylor, it is generally clean racing. We heard from Jordan how tricky it can be in the sim sometimes to avoid those little bits of casual contact that in the real world you wouldn't think twice about, but on the sim, the netcode can take over sometimes and exaggerate those bits of contact to make them look much worse than they are. And so the fact that those leaders are able to race as closely together as they do with minimal contact shows that those drivers have very mature heads on very young shoulders. Those behind are just having fun and getting well and truly stuck in, aren't they? Harley Connolly and Nathan Jensen are side by side now. And Harley Connolly turns into a corner to find that he had a Citroen Saxo on the inside of him. Oh, he's got his old friend back with him now, Gabriel Doyle Parfait. Now, this is round 2 between these two in this race. Doyle Parfait back up the inside at Coppice, carries a bit too much speed into the corner, and Harley Connolly goes straight back through. These cars really do look understeery, don't they, as we get later into the race, which is interesting really, because most of what I heard at Silverstone about these cars was how snappy they were, how oversteery you had to have them set up to get the car rotated, whereas here at Donington it really does look like they're just chewing up those front tyres, and that is leading to a lot more understeer than oversteer. Oh, Nathan Jensen is off, just as he was making some progress inside the top 10. The latest driver to go around at the chicane now. Here comes Riley Bishop and Jordan Taylor, and again there's a squeeze from Jordan. He needs to be careful with that. Riley is very quickly going to run out of patience with him. I think Riley himself sideways through the old hairpin though. Both of them were completely sideways, but keeping it under control just about. And CJ Morgan can breathe a sigh of relief because he's just gapped them by a couple of car lengths again. CJ, by the way, was about 0.2 of a second quicker than the leader on the previous lap, so a gap that was once 2.5 seconds is now down to 2 seconds. But we're now getting into that final third of the race where tyre wear will start to come into play. Those who have looked after the rubber in the early stages, well, this is where they may well start to find an advantage. From what we saw of CJ in race 1, he was pretty hard on the tyres. He's had to be even harder, likely, this time, working his way through the traffic as he has done. See whether he's got anything left in the tank to chase down Jamie Petters, who is showing us now what he was really able to in race 1. I felt that he had really good pace in race 1, but just couldn't ever establish himself in clean air. But now he's in clean air. He's proving difficult to catch. Now, I am going to make a prediction here that either Jordan Taylor or Riley Bishop are not going to finish this race on the podium because, well, they can't both finish on the podium, I suppose, as it is, but there's a good chance neither of them will finish at all the way they're going, because this really has a feel of unstoppable force meeting a movable object, doesn't it? Riley Bishop has been staring at the back of that number 19 Citroen Saxo all night long, it will feel, and Jordan Taylor has not been making it easy for him to come through, so I do sense at some point that this is all going to reach boiling point. Created a bit of distance between each other for the time being, but Riley has a much better run through the old hairpin, picks up that slipstream through Starkeys, and let's see whether he's close enough to have a go into McLean's corner. Might have a go even if he's not close enough, quite frankly, the way this race has been going, but no. Ooh, well, takes an earlier apex, but that's good. You really want to hook those inside tyres over the curb. That really rotates the car, almost rally style, to get that rotation. If the front tyres are wearing, you use the curbs to try and get that front end to bite. Something that you can do a lot more safely, actually, in the sim than you can in real life. In real life, you risk pulling a tyre off a rim by doing that, but thankfully, here in Assetto Corsa, thankfully for the drivers anyway, that's not something that's simulated, so they can be fairly adventurous with their curb usage. And nowhere else is that more evident than the chicane. Right, here we go. Jordan Taylor gets it all wrong through the chicane, and actually Riley Bishop is going to have a pretty easy run this time into third position. So Jordan Taylor, all of that defence was for nothing in the end, because Riley Bishop has now gone through. And I now think Riley might be able to pose a problem for CJ Morgan, because CJ suddenly has started to lose quite a bit of time to the race leader. Jamie Petters just did a purple Sector 1, meaning he went quicker through the first part of the lap than anyone's been all race long, and we are nearly 3/4 of the way through. We've done 9 racing laps, so exactly the point of the race where you'd expect him to be losing grip, he doesn't seem to be, whereas CJ Morgan has dropped back on the previous lap by a fair chunk. It was about 4/10 slower on the previous lap, the gap up to 2.8 seconds again. So CJ perhaps struggling for grip, Jamie Petters seemingly getting quicker as the race goes on. That last lap was his fastest lap of the race, and I think I'm right in saying the fastest lap of the race. Yes, it was. Only 2 other drivers have got into the 127s. They are Riley Bishop and Jordan Taylor. and they were still a couple of tenths slower than Jamie Petters has gone. So that's a bonus point for Jamie, of course. Get a bonus point for a fastest lap in either race, bonus point for pole in race 1 too. And then 25 points for winning a race, and that looks increasingly likely to go the way of Jamie Petters. Further back, they're still fighting as if there are 25 points on the line for 10th position. That's not quite the case, but they're fighting really hard anyway. Nathan Jensen and Gabriel Doyle parfait. As they do scrap, they bring Lewis Stannard back into the picture. And Lewis carrying all that momentum up the hill, and Gabriel tried to cover, but a little bit too late. Thankfully saved the wobble that he had. Couldn't quite tell if there was contact or if that was just Gabriel frantically jerking the wheel to try and get out of the way of the blue and white car that was coming from behind like a missile. Got Lewis Stannard back into 12th position then, Nathan Jensen ahead of him. So this all going on outside of the top 10 right now, but wherever you are in the field, you've got someone to race with, which is always nice to see. Again, that's another factor in junior racing. There will inevitably be some drivers who are a little off the pace, but as long as they've got someone to compete with, then they're still learning. You learn very little driving around a track on your own. If you're in wheel-to-wheel combat like this, and combat really is the right word, then you're going to learn an awful lot of racecraft, which you can then apply when you eventually make your way towards the front of the field, which I'm hopeful we'll see from some of these drivers as the season goes on. In fact, we're seeing it already from Jamie Petters, who was not this quick at Silverstone last time out. And yet here at Donington has been, well, in this race, fastest driver on the track. Wasn't necessarily able to show it in race 1, certainly after the spin, but now looking really, really secure with just under 4 minutes to go. With Lewis Stannard, whose car seems to grip quite nicely actually through the old hairpin. Now there's a gap on the inside, and well, fair play to Nathan Jensen there for not closing that door. There is a bit of sideways action going up the hill, but Stannard goes through. And Lewis Stannard then into 11th position, Nathan Jensen dropping a place, but again, heads-up driving there from Nathan. He knew that he'd left the door open, he knew he was beat, and he didn't just try and close the door anyway. He allowed Stannard to go through, knowing that an opportunity may present itself to come back through. Lewis Stannard does not leave in quite the same amount of space at Coppice Corner. They both make contact, they both get sideways, and Gabriel Doyle parfait joins in the fun. He bashes into the side of Stannard's car as well. They're all very lucky to still be pointing the right way. These are front-wheel drive cars, so I suppose if you do get sideways, you stamp the throttle and steer into it and hope for the best. But we've seen it is possible to lose control, and they're on the verge of doing so, I think now. Certainly Gabriel Doyle parfait, who's all over the place into the chicane. Stannard goes back through, and so does Nathan Jensen. So 2 up, 2 down for Gabriel. Finds himself once again down in unlucky 13th place. Charlie Constable is obviously a non-finisher from this one. And what about second position though? Because Riley Bishop has closed back in on CJ Morgan. His previous lap was about 3, nearly 4 tenths quicker than CJ actually. And actually was about 3 tenths quicker than the race leader, but we'll be starting the penultimate lap this time, so I don't think Riley's going to have time to go after Jamie Petters, but he might be able to steal second from CJ Morgan, and this will be of significance because CJ's already sort of set himself out as the early season favourite, having won the first 2 points races of the season. And Riley, when we lost on Riley or Jamie or Jordan, that, you know, you're going to have to try and beat CJ to win this championship, so any time you can get ahead of him at the end of a race is worth doing. The points advantage you get is worth doing. Of course, the championship standings in the very early stages of the season so tight that one good result for you or bad result for your rival can create a big swing in the points. As it stands, I can tell you that CJ Morgan is 12 points clear of Riley Bishop after that second race of the season earlier on. So Riley, if you can get ahead of him, will take an extra 2 points back, whereas at the moment he's losing 2 points to CJ Morgan. So that gap would creep out ever further. Third place is Lewis Stannard, actually, who's not had the best of nights so far, but Lewis Stannard is still third in the points, ahead of Jensen Bell and Jamie Petters. So Petters the one who could really gain. Those 3 actually tied on points right now. There goes Alex Mostad up the inside of Zach Palmer. Haven't seen much of these two in this race, but they both had a quietly solid race, and Zach Palmer there leaving plenty of room for Mostad to go around the outside. And yeah, Zach Palmer, who led for a little while early on, he's faded now, but not too far. And as attrition has struck a number of other drivers, he's pretty much guaranteed to finish at least 7th, because in 7th place right now is Luke Stintler. And Stintler, I reckon, might be able to close in on this group. Yeah, he's doing 1 minute 27.9s. So actually one of the quickest drivers on the track right now, Luke Stintler, slower only than Riley Bishop, who we know has got a sizable slipstream from CJ Morgan ahead of him. did have, but then lost about 3/10 on that lap. So the second to third place gap going back out again. CJ Morgan establishes himself out in front. That's another good sign, really, in CJ's favour. He's learning from what happened in race 1, just driving a little bit differently in race 2 to manage those tyres, to the point that he's actually gaining on Jamie Petters again. But we're on to the final lap of the race, and Jamie enjoys a 2.1 second lead. So as long as he doesn't make any mistakes, the race victory should be his now. He will be concentrating fully here on not making any little errors, not dipping a wheel on the grass, just making sure that he brings this car home. He's actually gapping CJ Morgan again this lap as he really asserts his authority on the second race of the night. Well, the championship that many were predicting would be dominated by CJ Morgan after what could so easily have been a double victory, was probably going to be a double victory at Silverstone a week ago before the red flag in race 2. Tonight we've seen that there are a few people ready and willing to challenge him. We've seen some fantastic racing here at Donington Park for sure, and Jamie Petters bouncing back beautifully from a really unlucky incident in race 1 where he was fired out of a podium place potentially. He will more than make up for that in race number 2 as he leads the bulk of the race to take the victory and become the second different driver of the season to take a race win. CJ Morgan second, Riley Bishop gets on the podium, this time in third with Jordan Taylor fourth. Alexander Mostav gets the better of Zach Palmer in their late fight for 5th. That's a really solid result for both of them. And Luke Stintler, a little bit unlucky, really, tonight. He could very easily have had himself a couple of podium finishes, but has to settle for 7th in race 2. Jensen Bell is going to come home in 8th, and then Harley Connolly 9th after a couple of incidents in the early stages, with James Sherrington set to complete the top 10. There is James coming out of the Robert chicane for 13th and final time. 14th. Final time, I should say. Then it will be Nathan Jensen, and the last of the battles really is the one for the wooden spoon. Lewis Stannard and Gabriel Dorr-Parfait nose to tail, well, sort of nose to tail, heading into the last corner. But barring a mistake for Stannard, I think he should keep Gabriel at bay. Gabriel started on the front row and has certainly had his fair share of screen time tonight. Not always for the best of reasons, but he's kept us thoroughly entertained, as he did a week ago. He will unfortunately, though, have to settle for 13th and last. Although not really last, because Charlie Constable was a non-finisher. So, entertaining stuff from our second race of the night. We will hopefully get a chance to talk to our podium finishers in the near future. But it's Jamie Petters who comes home a race winner. And I can tell you that some discussions have been going on amongst the production crew in the background, and Jamie Petters has been decided as our driver of the round as well. So the free set of FreeM Sim Racing gloves will be going his way, and that might even further enhance his performance when we reconvene in a week's time. So congratulations to Jamie. An unlucky first race, but a really, really strong second one, and a well-deserved race victory, and 25 championship points will go his way as a result. So, entertaining stuff from Donington Park. As we expected, this is a track that I promised at the top of the show would provide some really good racing, and it certainly did. A little bit of argy-bargy at times, but we have got a set of drivers, I think, set to compete for this championship who are all capable of winning. They're all capable of scoring points, and more importantly, in a way, they are all capable of racing each other cleanly, and that's what we really wanted to see. And we will hopefully have a chat now to a couple of our podium finishers. We do have second and third places here anyway, so what we'll do, we'll go backwards this time, shall we? And we'll see if Jamie makes his way in here. We'll start with our third place finisher, Riley Bishop, though, who hopefully can hear us, and we can hear him now. Riley, another fighting drive for you there in race number 2. You happy with the way that tonight's gone?
Not as what I would have wished, as I got the pole, but it was still fair racing, so it was a pretty good race.
Yeah, that's sort of how I summarised it as well. You would have liked to have got a podium for sure in race 1, but managing to score some good points in race 2. I really enjoyed watching that battle that you had with Jordan. It was no holds barred, wasn't it? But it looked like you were both enjoying yourselves.
Yeah.
And more of that to come, I'm sure, later in the season. How confident are you then, do you think, that perhaps you can mount a championship challenge? Because the pace is there, isn't it? It's just a case of putting it all together.
Yeah, I've got the pace. It's just the overtaking I might need to work on, and the starts. But other than that, it could be a good championship bout.
I think so, and I was just saying before you jumped in here that there's a group of drivers now sort of establishing themselves at the front, and do you think that's how it's going to stay, or do you think there are others maybe out there who haven't really yet shown exactly what they can do?
I think everyone's pretty much got a potential of trying to snatch this championship, because everyone's pretty much got the pace as well.
Yeah, certainly. That's what we're hoping to see, and perhaps a few drivers improving as the season goes on. Riley, congratulations, though. A solid night in the end. Not the race win that you'd have been aiming for, but some good points in the bag. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you very much.
Riley Bishop then picks up his podium finish here in race number 2 at Donington Park, and of course was chasing for the bulk of that race our runner-up finisher, CJ Morgan. That doesn't sound quite as nice as race winner, does it, CJ? But I guess this is what championships are about. When you can't win, you try and finish second, and that's what you managed to do.
Yeah, it's definitely doesn't got the quite as good of a ring to it, does it? But I'm happy with the race. At the end of the day, it was damage limitation. At least I still gained points on Riley, who at the minute, due to Levine not being here, was my rival in the championship now. Unfortunately, Jamie just got away at the start, and I think most of the race we were lapping about the same pace because the gap stayed between 2 and 2.5 seconds, so couldn't quite gain that extra bit of lap, but it was still a good race nonetheless.
I'm interested to get your thoughts on this then. Would you agree with my assessment that this championship is going to get harder and harder as the season goes on? Because I think we've already seen that from what we had a week ago at Silverstone, where, let's face it, you were definitely the class of the field, to here at Donington, where you've had a real fight on your hands. It's something I really enjoy about junior racing, that drivers do get quicker the more races they do, and I suspect your job is only going to get harder from here on in.
100%. People are just going to adjust to the car a bit better. I think I was just quite lucky. I adjusted quite fast to the car, because I race the Saxos in real life, so I kind of know the gist, and because I've raced majority of the tracks that we're doing on the calendar. But I think as the season goes on, people are going to adjust, people are going to improve, and it's going to get harder. But that's why I'm trying to build the biggest lead I can at the start.
How many transferable skills are there then from the real car? Obviously, you can only go so far in sim racing, and this is a mod that's been created specifically for this championship. But it does seem that some of the characteristics that are there in the real championship have followed through into this. Is that how it feels from the driver's seat?
100%. There are some aspects of the car that you learn through experience of driving it. So I think that's where I've had the advantage to start off with, but as the season goes on, I think people are going to adjust and realise what they need to do to gain that extra few tenths.
We're looking forward to it, and I think perhaps I can sense in your voice you're relishing the challenge as well, CJ. Thank you again for coming in for a chat. Big congratulations, another solid night here at Donington, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Andy.
CJ Morgan then happy, satisfied perhaps is the word to use, with his second place here at Donington. But we do have a new race winner in the Junior Saloon Car Championship official eSeries, and that driver is Jamie Petters. Jamie, huge congratulations. Before we get on to the good stuff, I do want to just touch upon race 1, because this could easily have been a double podium finish, couldn't it? Obviously you'll be disappointed with what happened in that first race. It was a great battle until it went wrong though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely could have gone better. I'm not really too sure what happened, but I was just fighting from the back from halfway through the race, really.
Which was a shame, because you proved in that race how quick you could be in clean air, and that seems to be a big thing in this championship. If you can break away at the front and not have to get involved in that side-by-side battling, you can really show what you've got. You've got to be happy with the pace that you did have there in that second race.
Yeah, no, that was ideal, really. I didn't really expect it, to be honest, because in qualifying it wasn't necessarily that great, but pulled through in the race, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Some drivers just better racers perhaps than qualifying. Nothing wrong with that. You get more points for winning races than you do pole positions. You're going to need a few points to really establish yourself as a championship contender, but how confident are you that that can happen, that you can be up there challenging people like Riley and CJ by the end of the season for the championship?
Well, if it can continue the way that race did, then I'd like to think I have a fair chance, but I'm not too sure where I am in the standings now, but didn't get the greatest Silverstone start, so
No, absolutely not. But early days, and I can tell you, you've definitely jumped up the order a little bit after tonight. So that's been really good to see. And you're taking an immediate prize as well from tonight, because we've all decided behind the scenes here that you are our driver of the round for the perseverance through race 1 and for that really exemplary drive in race 2. So a pair of sim racing gloves courtesy of FreeM will be finding their way to you very shortly. Congratulations.
Thank you.
There we go. So Jamie not going home empty-handed. He gets himself the 25 points and a pair of sim racing gloves as well. Jamie, we'll speak to you next week. Well done.
Lovely. Thank you.
And that just about is that then. Some fantastic racing here at Donington Park tonight. And we're looking forward to more of the same as the season goes on. Well, Jamie was just asking about points. We can give him an answer now. He has moved up into 3rd place in the championship. The headline is that CJ Morgan retains a healthy championship advantage, though. 14 points to the good over Riley Bishop, but with 25 points available for a win, 53 available every week of racing. It is not all over yet, that is for sure. And CJ, we saw today, is not going to have this all his own way. Riley Bishop's second. He's got a 4-point cushion over Jamie Petters. So Jamie almost into second, actually, despite the dramas of race 1. Zach Palmer, Alexander Mostav, I mentioned that they were both flying under the radar a bit in race 2. Sort of the same in the championship, really. They're 4th and 5th ahead of Jensen Bell, Harley Connolly, Lewis Stanhard, Jordan Taylor is 9th, but remember, he's only raced 1 week. Didn't race last time at Silverstone, so doing well to be top 10 already, with Nathan Jensen completing that top 10 in the championship standings. And you can see all of the rest of them further down. We've had, I think, 17 drivers so far have scored points this season, and you score points wherever you finish. So even if your race isn't going too well, it is well worth continuing to the end. So that is it from Donington Park, unfortunately, because I've really enjoyed the racing from here, as I always do. But we're heading to an equally exciting, albeit very different circuit in a week's time as we travel down south to Brands Hatch and the short, sharp Indy circuit. It again is a layout that is always popular in the real world Junior Saloon Car Championship, and I'm sure will be here on the sim as well. Be sure to join us, same time, same place next week, as we march towards the halfway point in the Junior Saloon Car Championship eSeries. CJ Morgan enjoying a relatively comfortable championship lead, but the job is only going to get harder for him as we move on through the rest of the season. Well, thank you very much for joining us here tonight. A big thanks as well to everyone working behind the scenes. Series organiser Mick Sutton, race director and safety car driver Scott Thorne, who once again got a couple of laps in earlier on in the night, and to Tom O'Farrell, who's been busy working as our broadcast director behind the scenes. I've been Andy McEwen. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week at Brands Hatch. Until then, goodbye.